Live in the End by Neville Goddard. You may have heard me mention this many times, but every single definite chief aim that I've ever created, conceived in my mind since 2004, I brought forth. Now, a definite chief aim is beyond a wish. To me, it's a spiritual commitment. It's a commitment with myself that I am going to shift reality, the external world, to reflect that what is in my imagination. It is through this process of creating what I desire that I attracted the works of Neville Goddard. We come to a point in our life where we start to get really streamlined, pure communication reflected from the external world that reveals to us about ourselves. What is within ourselves? Well, within ourselves is the belief that all things are possible, or the lack of it, or a varying scope, somewhere in between. In order to take the power back within, we have to believe that all things are possible, and we believe that all things are possible by creating. Once we hold in our imagination that what we desire, and we bring it forth, we start to believe that the power is within. And the repetition of doing this over and over again brings us more power and more information to reveal that we are the cause within. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. John 1:1. The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. John 1:14. So in the beginning, when everything did not exist, there was the Word. The Word existed, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Now the Word became flesh and made his dwelling amongst us. Let's go a little deeper into this. The same creative Word that created the universe and sustained it dwells in us. Therefore, with God all things are possible. Mark 10:27. And therefore with man all things are possible. So he states in one book. Matthew, with God all things are possible. But in Mark he states all things are possible to him, meaning man, who believes. So what is the Word then? Well, one of the things we learn in this journey is that words represent symbols in the mind. So speech, or the words, or spoken words, are the image of mind. That's how we represent the image of mind. If I ask you to communicate to me what you believe reality consists of, or what is in your imagination, or what would you like to create, or how you believe reality works, you would use words to express it to me. Now, this is not always the case, because some individuals will express it through their art or dance, but there's many different kinds of expressions. One of the commonly accepted forms of expressions, however, is the spoken word and the written word. So because we say in the beginning was the Word, we believe that it was a pen or a spoken word. But always remember this, that word represents the image of mind. It is a description of what is in the mind. So in the Bible, the Word refers to imagination, that what is in the mind. And in the beginning was imagination. God created the world through imagination. And the Word became flesh and made his dwelling amongst us. That means that God gave us as well our imagination. And this imagination is what we use to create reality. That is the Word right there. Now, what is in our imagination represents the words that we use, or our form of creative expression. And our form of creative expression reveals what is within. What is within will be brought forth. As mentioned, all definite chief aims are brought forth, but that is a specific choosing and a directing of this power. A misuse or misdirecting of this power is to take in the imagination or five sensory-based data and meaning from the external world, impress that on the subconscious mind and express outward, and creating if it is not harmonious. If it is harmonious, then it is related to us understanding that we have the power within. In other words, any information that we receive via our five senses, if it is given the meaning of being related to the power within, or the power of our mind, empowerment, and the belief that we can do, then it is meaning that reveals the truth about the beginning. And the beginning was that God created the world, and the Word became flesh, as in the Word was with God, and God created the world with the Word, which is the mind. And the Word became flesh, as in the mind was given to man, and dwells among us, as in we have the power to use this mind to create what we want. If any information denies the fact that we can use our mind and our imagination to create reality, then that information is taking the power away from us. We have to consume and assume that we have the power within because we do, and we have many different experiences in our reality where we have used our mind to bring forth what we desire or what we don't desire based on what is expressed in the external world by reflecting upon what we created in our past. Know that what you have created in your past came from programming that you assumed via your five senses, and that was data-based programming that you assumed via the five senses, as well as the sixth sense, which is the imagination. And you've given meaning to this data, and that data plus meaning has impressed itself on the subconscious mind and expressed outwards to materialize into form. Now, realizing that this is what has happened, then we have always been using our imagination to create reality. The question is, are we conscious of it? So going back to earlier when I said every definite chief aim has been brought forth for me, it is because in those moments I have decided that what was I wanted to create, what was my definite chief aim. And I made a commitment to creating it. And on the journey, I removed disempowering programming, limiting beliefs that held me back to realize this potential that I have God that dwells within me in my mind, the power of God, and I can work with it to create that what I desire. Now, anytime meaning denied it, I realized that it came from five sensory-based data, and it was not from the sixth sense, because the imagination will always show you how to bring it forth if you believe. If thou canst believe, all things are possible to him that believeth. That is within. You have to believe within, and that is the imagination, the belief plus that what you desire, that brings it forth. And if there is not the belief that all things are possible, then reflect upon that, because that did not come from within. That did not come from God within. That came from five sensory-based data plus meaning that you assume to be true that came from the external world. Now, realizing that this is the way it is, you can release that. So when we say here, with God all things are possible, and we realize that the Word was God, then in the mind all things are possible, and in imagination all things are possible. But do we believe that in our mind and our imagination is possible? We have to reflect back at the limiting beliefs that we have assumed to be true, and release them so that we can realize that we have the power within and work with it by creating one definite chief aim, which is a spiritual commitment, and staying with it till it is brought forth, which is the essence of living in the end. So this creative word is in us. Well, what is this creative word? It is your wonderful human imagination. That's Christ in man. Man is all imagination, and God is man, and exists in us, and we in him. The eternal body of man is the imagination, and that is Christ himself, the divine body, Jesus, and we are his members. So if that is Christ, then what does Christ represent? Well, Christ has stated that all things are possible to him that believeth, number one. Number two, the kingdom of heaven is within us, which is harmony. And number three is that if you believe that all things are possible. So in other words, if you believe, and as you believe, so it shall be done unto you. So as you believe, so it shall be done unto you. If you believe all things are possible to him that believeth, gives you the power, because the power is in belief, which is within you. So what is belief then? Belief are stories that we assume to be true or false. They are received via five senses, data from the external world plus meaning, or via the imagination or sixth sense. You can, within yourself, believe it's possible and associate everything in the external world to be related to the thought that you imagine to be, or that what you desire to create, by changing the beliefs within. Or you can assume that disempowering beliefs in the external world are true, and that breaks the belief that you are able to bring forth that what you desire. And that is Christ right there, is the absolute conviction and firm belief that all things are possible. The kingdom of heaven is within you, and that as you believe, so it shall be done unto you. So whatever you believe will be brought forth. As you believe, so it shall be done unto you. Whatever you believe has been brought forth. Reflect back, take inventory of your external world, and realize that it was brought forth via the beliefs. And where were the beliefs taken in? We can change the beliefs. So when you say, I am, that's he. So reflect back then on what you say I am to. I am wealthy, or I am not wealthy. I am healthy, or I am sick. Whatever you put I am is a representation of the belief. Now think about this for a moment. If the five senses deny it, many people have a hard time saying I am, that what is the polar opposite of what the five senses deny. For example, if right now you see yourself as creating success in the business world, and you say I am not there yet, then you represent to yourself the state of I am not there yet. It is expressed outwards and revealed. Now, you look at what's revealed in the external world, and you might say, because it's not revealed in the external world right now, it is not true. And that is what you believe, and that is what you associate the power of I am to. Now, if you look at the external world and you say, I am that, and you maintain it with consistency, what you'll notice is your thoughts, your emotions, your actions, the way you navigate reality, and that what is brought forth will start to change. And to the extent that you hold that, that is how you live in the end. So if the five senses deny it, it is because it is denying it based on facts that you assumed to be true or are assuming to be true, but however, they are not related to using the power of the creative mind or the creative word or the creative imagination, which the creative imagination means to create within. And it is within us that is reflected outwards. So that is what created the world, the imagination. And imagination was given to all of us as the power to create. Everything that has been created in the world was first created in the imagination. And everything that has been brought forth in the world was believed to, at one point, be able to be brought forth. So do you hold that same level of conviction with that what you desire to create? And if you don't, then identify what beliefs are related to denying that what you desire to create, and change those beliefs. And what you'll start to notice is that the external world will reflect to you harmoniousness, because the kingdom of heaven is within you, and that represents harmony. Harmonious within will be reflected as harmonious in the external world. So why is it that I was able to bring all of my definite chief aims forth? Because all I did was hold in my mind that it was possible to bring forth any definite chief aim. I realized that it was not a wish, but a spiritual commitment, a definite chief aim. And then whatever five sensory data was experienced with meaning that denies it, I changed the meaning within until it was brought forth. Some way, somehow, it was brought forth. There was various stories. You can, as Steve Jobs said, connect the dots looking backwards after it's brought forth and say, this is how I did it, and this is what happened, and this was circumstance, and so forth. But the bottom line is this. Every single element that denied that what was related to my definite chief aim, I changed the meaning. So now, at the current state of working with this information, when I create a definite chief aim, I reflect about how everything in the external world is supportive and related to my definite chief aim. It is through this that you create and work with the power of Christ, which is all things are possible, that harmonious within, which is the definite chief aim, will be reflected outwards, and as you believe, so it shall be done unto you. So I have to make sure that as I believe means all people, environments, circumstance, and information in the external world represent and is related to bringing forth my definite chief aim, even if everybody else denies it. Take a piece of information. If everyone says to me, well, this information denies your definite chief aim, I must change the meaning of what they're saying and say that is right from their perspective and what they're creating, but from my perspective, I choose to identify this information to be harmonious and related to my definite chief aim. And the bottom line is this. You don't have to argue. This is why it's important then to reflect. Do you really need to talk about it, or do you just need to honor that what is in your imagination? What takes priority is honoring that what is in your imagination. And a lot of times that might entail not necessarily talking about it. So when you say, I am, that is he. Can you really conceive a scene which is, if true, would imply the fulfillment of your dream. Just imagine it. Certainly you can imagine it, but the problem is, will you believe it? Will you believe in the reality of that imagined thing? So create your definitive fame. Imagine in your mind what it is and what you desire as far as the outcome, and reflect back on any kind of experiences that you have through the journey between the point of saying that this is what I want to create and it being brought forth, that you experience five sensory-based data, because the sixth sense won't deny it. It's just the 5 sense data plus meaning that may reflect on the imagination, may get you to think certain things, but it's always the 5 sensory data that will deny it. But it's not denying it in the sense that it's holding you back. That's a story. It is revealing to you about yourself. One of my favorite quotes from As a Man Thinketh by James Allen is, circumstance does not make a man, it reveals him to himself. Now, circumstance, as in the external world, is revealing to you how to be harmonious with your definite chief aim, that what you desire to create, the imagination, the scene in your imagination. Now, that scene in your imagination is like a compass, so that what is revealed to the external world may deny it through meaning. You can change the meaning within to make it harmonious. Then all of a sudden, now it's harmonious. Say you are walking down the street and you decide to share with somebody some element related to your definite chief aim through conversation. You're walking with a friend, and they deny it. They say, that's not possible. It's not able to be brought forth. There's many circumstances that are not within your control, and you can't make it happen. You can pause for a moment and say, this is data plus meaning that this person is giving to me, and they are a reflection of me, and they are revealing to me the doubts within myself, and they are expressing what is within myself. And what I'm going to do is intercept the meaning and change the meaning within to say they are speaking from their perspective and how they believe reality to work, and I accept them, and I appreciate them for sharing, and I appreciate them as a person. What I choose to honor is the truth of what I believe, which is that all things are possible, and what they are revealing to me, if I react to it in an emotional way that is inharmonious, that there is inharmony within myself. What is it from my past that created this inharmony within? And then right then and there, you can write down different elements of your emotions or stories from your past that come up and reflect back on that, change the meaning within. And then what you'll start to notice is that when you have a conversation like that, if it ends up showing up again, is that you will just see it as related. And how will you see it as related? As in, that is their opinion, and my opinion is that my definite chief aim will be brought forth, and there is no tension, there's no anger, there's no need to argue it. I just simply honor that same feeling of the wish fulfilled. I'm still living in the end because I am that what I imagine, and because I now have this meaning that whatever this person says, or what everyone says, still reveals to me that I am that what I want to be, which is the end that I desire. I now have firm faith and conviction. And then what you'll start to notice is reality will start to present itself. If you were constantly around information, people, circumstance that was denying it, and you change the meaning to be harmonious within, what you'll find is that those circumstances no longer exist. That external world will no longer represent that to you, which is what was within, which is the programming that denies it. So in other words, anyone that reveals to you, denying that what is related to that what you desire to create, which is your definite chief aim, is revealing to you about yourself and actually helping you release that programming within. Because once that programming has been released within, it no longer represents itself in the external world. States of mind. So what we were talking about before we got to this point here is states of mind. Okay, there's certain states of mind. There's an empowered state of mind. There is a disempowered state of mind. There is the firm faith and conviction state of mind. There's many states of mind. And what we're talking about specifically when it comes to living in the end is adopting a spiritual state of mind called Christ. It says, if I could, this very moment, imagine myself into a state, any state at all, and dwell in it, well, now, what is dwelling in it? Well, I'm dwelling in it. Well, that's Christ, and that is the resurrecting power of the universe. So if I remain in the state, I will resurrect it and objectify it in my world. but I have to select it and enter the state. So this is the distinction that I found, that Christ's state is that what you desire to create. It is your spiritual commitment. It is your definite chief aim. And that represents understanding Christ. The definite chief aim is in the spirit of harmony. It's in the harmony of you, others, and evolution or divine. That is a representation of bringing forth Christ in the mind, holding on to that state. Now, to the extent that you hold on to that state, you work with the power of Christ to bring it forth. And that is a spiritual state that is a permanent state. In one of Neville's lectures, he mentions permanent states, and the spiritual states, different characters in the Bible representing spiritual states. Christ represents the spiritual state of all things are possible, the kingdom of heaven, and as you believe, all things are possible, so it shall be done unto you, and as you believe, so it shall be done unto you. That's what Christ represents. So do we hold that level of consciousness in our mind when we are believing that it is possible to bring forth that what we desire? That is the question. That's how we work with the Christ power within. If imagining creates reality, what are you imagining? For if Christ is the only creative power in the universe, then I identify him with my own imagination. Well, then my imagination is creating reality. So what am I imagining? Pick up the morning's paper, and I'm fed with everything I should not feast upon, all the horrors of the world, all the negative states of the world. After having read it for an hour, then I must either regurgitate it in some strange way, rub it out, because I can't go through life feeding upon such nonsense. So what does this mean? This means that at any moment, information that you receive via your five senses can change your state. What we want to remain is in the state of Christ when it comes to being related to that what we desire to create, our definite chief aim. So when I create a definite chief aim, my goal is to remain in the state of Christ. And any information that is received via the five senses that shifts me into another state other than Christ, I have to understand why that information is shifting me and change the cause within, as discussed earlier. And as a result of releasing the programming, which, by the way, most of it is subconscious programming, information that I have consumed in the past and identified with, to create even a sense of self or identity that is not related to my true identity, which is in alignment with Christ. And by releasing elements that are not part of my true identity, I can then be aligned with Christ no matter what information is given to me. But what I'll find most of the time is that I no longer have a desire to consume that information that is inharmonious. And any information that you receive that is inharmonious, you change the meaning within before you identify with the state that represents that information. So information, people, environment, circumstances represent varying states. There's permanent spiritual states, and one of the permanent spiritual states that we work with to create that what we desire is the permanent spiritual state of Christ. And that is the end, which is the final conclusion that all things are possible. The spirit of heaven, or the kingdom of heaven, is within you. And as you believe, so it shall be done unto you. That is a high, very high. Can you think of a higher, more empowering state to be than that represents Christ? Now, when you represent Christ to that what you want to create, then you work with the power of Christ, and that is done within. And the only thing that breaks this power, as mentioned earlier, is believing that the power of Christ is not within you through data and meaning received via the five senses, which you can change real time and be harmonious within and maintain that harmoniousness within to the point where you'll no longer have a desire, and you'll find yourself not even consuming information, external world, five sensory data, and meaning to be inharmonious, because that inharmoniousness did not exist in you after you've cleansed it. It may have once existed in you, but you had released it through this process, and then it no longer exists in you, and it did not exist in you within the past. Because, not to get too deep into this, but the story of past, present, and future is a story, and all that exists is the now. And what exists in the now is the state, and the state is living in the end if it is harmonious, and you believe it to be harmonious to your definite chief aim. And if you don't believe it to be harmonious, then you're probably living in the past. What we want to do is live in the end, which is, we can say in our mind, we conceptualize it as the future with the now. So there's the now and then the future. And if anything exists from our past, we have to ask ourselves, is what existing from the past connected to harmonious meaning and story? And we can change that meaning within. We can use timeline regression. We can revise. We can change the meaning from our past and release any elements that are not related to Christ. All things are possible, the power of Christ. I dare say that everyone here would say yes to the statement of Scripture, with God all things are possible. Mark 10:27. I don't think you'd be here if you did not believe in God, and the God to whom all things are possible. But maybe we stop right there, and we separate man from God. And my purpose is to show you that we are not two, we are one, that God actually became man, and man became God. So the idea behind this is to see yourself one with God, connected with God, part of God. Now, the meaning of how this actually works most likely goes beyond the conceptual ability to be able to articulate it. However, we don't need to get so deep into it. What we do have to realize is that we have the power of God with us at all times, and that is in our mind. God gave us the power of mind, and we work with the power of mind. And the more we work with the power of mind, the deeper the connection and relationship that we have to this power and the understanding. Much what I have found in this journey is the relationship with God. And Earl Nightingale had mentioned this in The Strangest Secret. One of the most profound things that he had learned in his life and cultivated is his relationship with God. And each one of us has a relationship with God. And God represents what we believe God to represent to us. And we understand that representation through this process. One of the best things that I did was to create a definite chief aim in 2004 and then stay committed to it till it was brought forth, and then continue repeating the process over and over again to create a definite chief aim and continuously bring it forth, because that right there is what built my own personal relationship with God. And I have many stories and meanings that I identify with my relationship to God that may or may not be meanings related to others, but there are permanent spiritual states. One is called Christ, and Christ represents all things are possible. And the more I'm able to bring forth my definite chief aim, the more I'm able to realize the power of Christ. And it is through this process that I have found my way through realizing the power of Christ, which represents a state representing all things are possible. The kingdom of heaven is within, and as you believe, so it shall be done unto you. Well, this is how I test myself. If Christ is in me, and all things are possible to Christ, then I must find out who he is. Well, I found him as my own wonderful human imagination. And because he dwells not only in me, he dwells in us, everything is possible to everyone in the world. And so, you help man best by telling him who Christ is. You could give him all the things in the world that he needs. He'll come back for more tomorrow, unless he knows who Christ is. So what is our service then in the world? Is to help everyone understand that they have the power within them. Should we choose to partake on sharing that service, it may not be part of what you want to do. But the only way to really serve another person is to help them realize the power within. We can't band-aid the solution. We cannot hide that this is true. We have to prove it to ourselves and realize that it is true and transfer that state in front of a person. How do we transfer the state? Well, Gandhi said it really well. Be the change. And should we desire to make a change in the world, then we represent all things are possible, the kingdom of heaven within, and that as we believe, so it shall be done unto you. And this is the essence then of all kinds of coaching, consulting, or mentorship, or any kind of process that a person goes through where they help another person. They represent Christ consciousness, and to the degree they represent Christ, they are able to reveal to the other person their own version of how to work with this power within through this state transference. We call this state transference in psychology or NLP, but what it really represents, when I went really deep into it, is the belief and the firm conviction that all things are possible, and being in the presence of the other person, no matter what they say, you will always respond with all things are possible in different representations, in different conversations. Why is it that we consume the same personal development information from thousands of books from many different philosophers that all say the same thing, that we become what we think about, that the power is within us? We have the ability to use our mind to create reality. Because the more we consume information from multiple different perspectives, we form a firm conviction. That's one of the ways that we form a firm conviction, not necessarily true for everybody, but we do that by representing Christ, and our own creative expression of that is by bringing forth what we desire. So in other words, the way to persuade someone to realize the power of Christ within them is to create. So by telling someone how it is, that's not what Neville means. He says represent Christ by creating that what you desire, and then when you create what you desire, the words, the articulation will be even more harmonious to the realization, but most of the persuasion, most of the understanding will be nonverbal. Now, when you study communication, and I'm a huge fan of studying communication, you realize that most communication is nonverbal. Most communication that's nonverbal, that nonverbal communication has more power on persuasion because it represents congruence or lack thereof. You can hear when somebody's communicating that they have not been able to articulate or create that what they believe they can create through their body language, through their tonality, and their form of expression, which is nonverbal. And from there, we feel if this person is congruent or not congruent. If they're not congruent, that means they are lying in some shape or form, and they cannot represent Christ because they do not believe that all things are possible. And the only way to represent Christ is to, as Gandhi said, be the change and create that what you desire. Make a commitment to yourself that you are going to put together a definite chief aim and bring it forth and do it again and again and again. And then after a period of time, you will be able to represent Christ, and that's when you'll have the most profound impact on having helped other people. Is there anything in the world that wasn't first imagined? Name one thing or point out one thing in the world for me that is now considered to be real that wasn't first only imagined. So everything was created in the mind using the power of God. So God created everything. God created everything in the beginning, and you have the power within you of God to create, and everything is created that what is imagined to be created. The question is, are we creating harmoniousness or are we not creating harmoniousness? That is our choice. And the harmoniousness is created by cleansing the disempowering negative meaning that we have assumed to be true and realize that, most of that or all of that negative meaning that we have assumed to be true, that scarcity meaning, came as a result of others not believing that they have this creative power within them. They always believed, or they somehow believe, that they have to take away from another human being in order to get what they want. This is not true. If all things are possible to him that believeth, then you do not need to take away from another human being. You can contribute to another human being, and that is what is referred to when I say the spirit of harmony. Now, if no matter what 5 sensory based data shows up within your awareness that denies what I'm saying, you have to release it bit by bit. And then when you release it, you'll be able to bring forth that what you desire, your definite chief aim, in a creative, harmonious way that is related to how you are to bring it forth. What is now proved was once only imagined. Therefore, this is true statement. All things were made by him, John 1:3, and he is your wonderful human imagination. All objective reality is solely produced through imagining. The clothes you wear, the chairs on which you are seated, this is which we are now placed. Everything was once only imagined. One of my favorite concepts from Neville is myself pushed out, and that we are all one mind, individualized. Okay, there's you, there's me, there's all the other individuals, individual expressions of one universal mind. Christ dwells in all. The Christ is the true identity of every man. Then every man must be myself pushed out. There can't be another if God is one. Therefore, I tell myself, as the seeming other, what I would do if I were you, and instead of giving him the thing that he needs physically, tell him how to get it for himself. In other words, be communicating about the power of Christ by being in the power of Christ, living in the power of Christ. And since speech is the image of mind, the communication, the speech that we communicate comes from a place of harmoniousness and congruence within. I should actually know exactly what I would like to be, and discovering what I would like to be against what I seem to be, dare to assume that I am it, and my assumption, though false, if persisted in, would harden into fact. So this means that when you say that you are that what you desire to create, which is your definite chief aim, if any kind of information denies it, creates any limiting beliefs or assumption within you that you are not that definite chief aim, as in not able to bring it forth, then you must persist in that assumption and then definite chief aim till it is brought forth by releasing the disempowering beliefs, changing meaning around to be harmonious and related. You have the power to change meaning. There is no meaning that is set in stone. You can inventory the meaning you're giving to different people, environments, circumstance, experience, and change that meaning real time within, and that meaning will impress itself on the subconscious mind and express accordingly as harmonious without. Harmonious within is represented and expressed as harmoniousness without. So we are told in Scripture, I kill and I make alive. I wound and I heal. I create the blessing, I create the curses, but now I must choose life. Choose the lovely things, but don't say there's another creator, for if there is another creator, then we have a conflict. So my own imagination can conjure loving things if I dwell upon them, or lovely things, but there can't be two gods. They can't be two creators. And if I can find the creator and identify him with my own wonderful human imagination, then I can't pass the buck. I can't turn to anything and blame it for things happening in my life. So the creative power is within you. God dwells within you as your mind. And you can work with this mind to create loving things or unloving things. And this is done by dwelling upon this. Last video I recommend you watch, is the 7-Day Mental Diet by Emmett Fox. And this is about releasing negative programming, disempowering programming that we are dwelling upon to create inharmoniousness in the external world by dwelling upon that inharmoniously within, inharmoniousness elements being dwelt upon within. As that changes, we reflect it as harmoniousness in the external world. It is easier to honor that what you desire to create, the definite chief aim, when you find yourself in harmonious conditions in the external world. That's part of the journey. As mentioned, creating many definite chief aims and bringing it forth becomes easier once you realize that you're not only creating the definite chief aim, but everything else related to the definite chief aim from within. So if there's inharmony expressed in the external world that causes you to deny that what you believe or assume that you can't create what you desire, then we can change that meaning to those various elements that are reflected in the external world, and we become harmonious within. And as a result of becoming harmonious within, we realize that everything is related to our definite chief aim, and actually everything is contributing to our definite chief aim. And the repetition of doing this allows us to create harmonious conditions in the external world repeatedly. And then when we create a new definite chief aim, it's easier to see the harmoniousness within, because what we experience in the external world is harmony, and we don't have to change the meaning as much, because then you have firm faith and conviction that it is all harmonious and nobody else can show up within your awareness, or any information can't show up. And if it does, it will never assume the meaning of denying that what you want to create. So how to live in the end? What would you feel like if now you were the man that you want to be? How would you see the world if things were as you desired them to be? Now, this is what I mean by living in the end. When you can imagine that this definite chief aim that you want to create looks a certain way, feels a certain way, is experienced via your 5 senses a certain way, as far as your senses can perceive, and realize that that is where you are stepping into, and you have the power of Christ, which represents a state within you to create that, then you have the ability to create it by honoring it and maintaining that, and through the journey as you experience reality, remove any kind of disempowering thoughts and beliefs about people, environment, circumstance, and information by changing the meaning within to be in alignment, you continue to live in the end. Well then, now this very instant, you desire happiness in marriage. You say, well, there's not one person in my world that is eligible. I know no one. You don't have to know anyone. See, that any kind of meaning like that is denying that what you desire. All you have to do is to decide within yourself what you want. Now what would you do if it was true? Would you wear a ring on one finger that would imply that someone placed it there? One that you admire? Well, then wear it. Don't wear a physical ring. Put it just as though he had been placed on the finger, and sleep feeling that you are feeling it is real. So in your imagination. Now, when you think about that, if you don't understand the power of God, which is the imagination, and the ability to work with the Christ state within to create what we desire, you might find yourself saying, well, it's just imagination. Now, he says, don't say it's all imagination. Certainly it is, because all imagination is Christ. Therefore, it's all reality. So when you say that's only my imagination, or you demean or belittle your imagination, what you're saying is that's only a thing called Christ when you treat imagination that way. So if all power to create and all things are possible are available in the state we call Christ, then we cannot just demean or belittle our imagination. We have to look at our imagination as the holy altar. It is sacred. It is within, and it is through the imagination that we create reality. And if we hold it through that level, then we value the kind of information that we're taking in, and we do not taint our power within, which is imagination. What do? All has been created by the Word, and the Word represents speech. Yes, I understand. Speech in communication as in verbal or written word. But going deeper, we understand that speech represents symbols, and symbols represent the states, and states represent mind. Okay, so mind and speech are related. How so? Speech is the image of mind. It is the expression of mind. And as mentioned, there's many different forms of expression, but we use speech, and when we say word, in the beginning there was the word, there was the mind. And God is the word, as in God is the mind. And thus, we have the power of God. And when we demean it, if we demean it, by saying that's all that is, we have a mind, but we don't have anything else, we do not use the power wisely. When we say that the mind is communication with God, or the mind is God, or we are one with God, and God is represented in our mind and our imagination, we begin to protect our mind. That's why I always mention guarding the subconscious mind. Well, it's not just the subconscious mind. It's the conscious mind, the subconscious mind, and you could say the superconscious mind. Whatever way you choose to represent it, it's up to you. But that mind that you have, that ability to imagine, is a very sacred place. And we have to remember that the power of Christ dwells in there, which is a state which we can put ourselves and find ourselves into that state, which represents all things are possible, the spirit of harmony within, which is the kingdom of heaven within, and also, as you believe, so it shall be done unto you. So you can then change your beliefs, and it shall be done unto you. You can hold with firm conviction that all things are possible, and consume information from people, environment, circumstance, books, whatever, that help identify and solidify that all things are possible, and release any kind of information and belief that things are not possible, and harmoniousness within, and you can maintain that harmonious within, and it'll be reflected in the external world as harmonious without. Now, as mentioned, another point, it's easier to create when you have harmoniousness in the external world, and that harmoniousness, or lack thereof, is created in the mind, because everything originated from the mind. So thus, what is creating the inharmoniousness in the external world? We have to identify what it is and change the meaning within in the mind, and thus it will express in the external world as harmoniousness, and then we will have a better ground to create the next definite jife. Now tonight, find out exactly what you, not what they think you ought to want, what you want. Ask no one's permission. You don't need anyone's permission. You only need your own decision. What do I want? Now, what would it be like if it were true? Now catch the mood and try to give that mood all sensory vividness of reality, all the tones of reality, and then sleep in it just as though it were true, and then await the inevitable. That is working with the power of Christ. That is working with all things are possible, because it is stated in there, in that paragraph. To be doing this performance or this imaginal act or creating your definite chief aim, whatever shape or form you want to do, from a place of believing it's possible, spirit of harmony within, and as you believe, so it shall be done unto you. So as you believe this, it shall be done unto you. Now, when you hear me say the statements of, as you believe, so shall be done unto you, all things are possible to him that believeth, do you really believe those statements? What causes us to not believe those statements? What are the beliefs that come up that causes us to not believe those statements? We have to write those down and rechange the meaning of that till it is true. And this is a journey. It doesn't necessarily have to happen overnight. And by the way, you don't have to be perfect with this, because we just have to get it to a level where it is believable enough that it will be brought forth. But on the journey, you will create another one and another one and another one, and then you will maintain a more permanent state and a permanent state of Christ. The inevitable is that you are going to resurrect it and objectify it on the screen of space, and then the world will call it real, and they may not believe you. It doesn't really matter. If you tell them it came to pass because you simply imagine it, no, they will point to the series of events that lead up to it, and they will give credit to the bridge of incidents along which you walked across towards the fulfillment of that state, and they will point out some physical thing that was the cause. No, the cause is invisible, for the cause is God, and God is invisible to mortal eye. So after you create that what you desire, you'll notice that you'll be able to connect the dots looking backwards, and others will say, it is because of those dots that you created what you want. But you will know that it is because you honored the state that what you desire, you lived in the end of the mind, and there was a bridge of incidents, yes, of course, that showed up, that went down the pathway towards the realization, but the bridge of incidents were caused by the mind within. When a person focuses on the bridge of incidents, they lose the ability to work with the mind. That's why we have to constantly be saying, and we've even talked about this many times in some of the books that are not as about the mind with business or personal development, not losing sight of the big picture. You've heard this many times. That's an indicator of working with this power. When someone says, well, we're working on this now, but we don't want to lose sight of the big picture, that is essentially living in the end. So we can do this. At any point in our journey, are we losing sight of the big picture? We have to maintain that living in the end perspective to reorient ourselves, to reorganize ourselves in case we're making it about the bridge of incidents. You know what you're imagining? No one knows, but you can sit down and imagine, and no one can stop you from doing it. But can you give reality to the imagined state? If you do, yes, a bridge of incidents will appear in your world, and you'll walk across some series of events leading up to the fulfillment of the imaginal state. But don't give causation to any physical step that you took towards the fulfillment of it. So it is the state that created. So we're taking the state that we desire to create, which is the imaginal state, and we're combining that with the Christ state, which is all things are possible. And by combining those two, it is brought forth. And we are to hold that state along the journey, all the way through, to maintain it. The only thing that can break you from maintaining that state is meaning that we have associated from our past to different people, environment, circumstance, or whatever. We have associated meaning that breaks the state. What is that meaning? We can change that meaning. So when you know what you want, remain faithful to that assumption, and that assumption, though at the moment is denied by your senses and denied by reason, if you persist in it, it will harden into fact. Are we not told that God calls a thing that is not seen as though it were seen, and then the unseen becomes seen? In the Bible, it's also said, be ye imitators of God. So how do you imitate God? God calls a thing that is not seen as though it were seen, and then the unseen becomes seen. Romans 4:17. He calls everything from the unseen into the seen in this simple manner, for he is a resurrecting power. What does resurrecting mean? It means hold the state in your mind, believe it to be possible, because all things are possible, working with the power of Christ, and it will be brought forth through a series of bridge of incidents. But we always have to remember that we have to hold the state of what we desire, plus the state of Christ as an overlay, as a background, as a framework for that what you desire. Now, the journey of life, you will be met by different elements that have denied it, and this is meaning that you have associated from your past that you can change. And the more you do this, the more you permanently live in that what is called Christ. If you want to copy this mind map, the link is in the description. Thank you very much for watching. I'll talk to you soon. Take care.